All right, Seattle hockey fans, we have some news about an announcement that we think is about women's hockey. Plus, I'm finally getting back to exit interviews after the whirlwind that was the Seattle Kraken firing another coach.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, been with you since the very beginning at the expansion draft for our first and only playoff run, and so many moments in between, including the most recent, the firing of Dan Bilesma. Anyway, when I'm not hosting your favorite podcast on the Seattle Kraken, or at least one of them, there's a lot of good ones out there, I am a contributor to CBS Sports, where I talk about the NHL and women's basketball. I am also your co-host of the Women's Hockey Report. Every Saturday, we talk women's hockey, and you're going to get a little bit of that on today's episode because we've got what we believe is some women's hockey news. Before we get into that, though, I want to tell you today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Okay. This is a little bit of a late episode. It was a little bit of a whirlwind of a day, and it started, early in my day by receiving the following email from Climate Pledge. I get Climate Pledge Arena updates, listservs, concerts, things of that nature. And today I received a media advisory press conference to announce major women's sports milestone. Oh my gosh, it's happening. I'm so excited. Okay, here we go. Seattle, April 28th, 2025. That's today. Media are invited to attend a press conference for a major announcement related to women's sports in Seattle. Where? Climate Pledge Arena. Enter through Gate 2. When? Wednesday, April 30th at 11 a.m. p.m. Door, just the one, open at 10:15 a.m. Pacific time. RSVP, please RSVP here. Boop. And then that was the noise indicating that it's a hyperlink. Okay. Ooh. We've been hearing about an announcement of an announcement, and now we have the announcement of the announcement. Now, the PWHL, even as at the moment that I'm recording, which is late into the night, the PWHL has not announced anything. It's only Climate Pledge Arena. And I'm thanking my lucky stars, I get those media alerts. Only CPA has released something. We had heard the murmurs. We had seen the potential logo leak. We have talked about this on the Women's Hockey Report, and I'm going to take you to the Women's Hockey Report in just a moment. But in case maybe you're not familiar, the Professional Women's Hockey League just announced expansion to Vancouver, and we were expecting that Vancouver and Seattle would be announced together. They weren't announced on the same day. Vancouver has already been announced, as you'll hear and watch in just a moment. And now it's your turn, Seattle, the Emerald City. Oh boy, this is exciting on so many levels. And I'm actually, I had planned today's episode, and other things happened, and it got pushed back. My recording, and I'm not even gonna lie, I'm a little emotional. Where's Biscuit? Oh my gosh, Biscuit, look at that. Women's Pro Hockey Seattle. I've got my Biscuit right here. So many people have worked really, really hard. And if I'm emotional as someone who's dedicated Biscuit's going to hang out with me today. And if you watch the show, you know I play with my microphone a lot. So hopefully Biscuit will hang tight. Okay. I want to make sure it's in the shot. Okay. I've dedicated a lot of time to women's sports. Women's sports is having a moment now. I'm finding my way in that moment, and women's hockey is how everything started for me. I've told my story before. Actually, I think someone asked me, right? And I talked about it on an episode once. I've talked about it on other podcasts. It's really special, Seattle. So although I don't officially know what the announcement is, all signs pointing that Seattle, you're getting a PWHL team, only the second ever expansion team in this league. Now, there's been expansion in other leagues and, things of that nature, but oh gosh, I'm so thrilled. And, what that means for the landscape, I'm super excited. And just more reasons for me to visit Seattle. So let me take you, though, to first Jessica Campbell. I got to sit down with her as the PWHL Takeover Tour was starting. Where did it start? In Seattle. The second stop was Vancouver. So, come on. So this is my interview with Jessica Campbell back in January. We were sitting in just like an extra locker room at Climate Pledge Arena. It's kind of across from the benches, like the tunnels where the players walk out to the benches. And it was a great conversation. You can watch the whole thing on the Locked On NHL channel under the Women's Hockey Report playlist. This is the Year of Beniers interview. We talked about a lot of things, but I'm going to play for you Jessica Campbell talking about being able to have her worlds converge and collide. She's an assistant coach for the Seattle Kraken, and the Seattle Kraken are hosting the PWHL. Here's Jessica Campbell and I talking about women's hockey.
I want to take you back to what was a special moment, I think, for a lot of people that were able to be here at Climate Pledge Arena. I love the story about how you picked your outfit. That was fantastic. But the crowd really embraced you for that first home game, afternoon game here at Climate Pledge Arena. What do you remember about that moment?
Yeah, obviously, very special moment for my family. My closest friends, former teammates, all flew in from all over North America, and just to have everybody together to just experience that moment. I think it really just hit me, when the crowd started cheering, of really my role and what this means to sport and to our industry. And sometimes, and naturally and probably to be assumed, like I'm so much in my job, and you don't think about and wake up thinking of the things that, maybe were felt in that moment. Just go about my work, tie up my skates the same way every day. And so to experience the energy, the reaction, I think it hit in many ways, just the magnitude of how much this means to our sport and to the fans, and what that speaks to them, and, whatever walk of life they come from or position they're in. I think there was a little piece for everybody in that moment, and that was really special for me to get to experience.
For sure. It was special for a lot of people, myself included. You mentioned like former teammates were there. I randomly saw Gags, walking into CPA, Alyssa Gallardi. And so, you have been able to just bring so many different worlds together. You're an entrepreneur, you've played in the women's game at the senior level, of course, in the NCAA. So when you think about this moment now, the PWHL Takeover Tour 2025, right here at Climate Pledge Arena, where you call home as an assistant coach, it just seems like your worlds are converging yet again.
Yeah, honestly, you hit it there. Worlds are converging, from seeing former teammates, some best friends of mine, getting to welcome them here into what feels like my world now and my place. Obviously, it's so special because that converging and the two coming together just goes to show how far we've come. And I'm so excited. I'm so proud of the girls. I'm honestly honored to get to be part of it in this way, because I feel like I've been also trekking on towards my own goals since playing as a coach, and to get to come together now and to celebrate really how far they've come as trailblazers, continuing to stay in their mission of getting a pro league and to get to now play in a fantastic crowd in a community and a place that's welcoming them with open arms. For me, I think as an outsider, seeing that it's so special. It's going to continue to grow the awareness, and the great product that they put on the ice that's always been there, but now is getting the deserving attention that it's always needed.
And yesterday we got to see both Montreal and Boston skate at KCI Kraken Community Iceplex. And I think they were a little taken aback, but by what Seattle Kraken fans know to expect, which is the fans not only being at practice, but applauding like everything. They love a good save. They love a good goal. They love when you hit the ice. They clap when you leave the ice. I mean, what is it going to be like just to, as you said, be able to have women's hockey have that experience and know that it's here in Seattle? What does that say about Seattle hockey culture?
Oh, I mean, our culture here is amazing. It's so diverse. It's exciting. It's, it's full of energy. And I think we get to feel that every day and get to experience that every day. And so to see the girls get to take that in, just from even the Iceplex standpoint, it is a little piece of the massive energy that this city brings to hockey. And so honestly, it's special. And like I said before, they're worthy of it. They're worthy to see fans clapping and cheering for every move, every save, every goal. And that's part of the game. That's part of the energy and the highs of the game. And so it's another celebration of the step forward for them.
That's Jessica Campbell. We had a great conversation. I'm a huge fan. I love getting the opportunity to really sit down and talk with Jess because I like how she and Dan Bilesma, quite honestly, approach player development. And I've mentioned this a few times in passing, but I am expecting to catch up with Jessica Campbell. I'm on the road again. Unfortunately, I will not be headed to Seattle. I'm headed to the opposite coast, but Jessica Campbell is supposed to be there as well for the ESPNW Summit. So to be continued with regard to Jessica Campbell, I have a lot of questions, especially with the news of, Dan Bilesma. But I'm so grateful that I got to talk to Jessica Campbell on the day that the PWHL is having the Takeover Tour at Climate Pledge Arena. And now we are just days away from what we are anticipating will be the announcement that women's pro hockey biscuit is coming to Seattle. But now on Locked On Kraken, let me take you just to a little bit of my conversation with my Women's Hockey Report co-host, Rachel Donner. She's also the co-host of the Locked On Flyers show. But we talked about expansion because we do know we're getting Vancouver expansion, and we talked about when we would perhaps hear about Seattle. So here's a little taste of what we talked about the other day on the Women's Hockey Report. Have an official new team, PWHL Vancouver. I mean, that's the logo, one of the logos. It is the logo. But I love how they incorporated the Pacific Northwest with the trees in the background.
Yes.
But let's talk about, Rachel, what we know about PWHL Vancouver.
Right. And it was interesting because earlier in the week, there was a little bit of a snafu leak on the store website for the PWHL that showed both that logo and a potential PWHL Seattle logo. So that's why, like, the thought is there, and it's legit to think that Seattle is the other city here, which of course they have not officially announced. But as we talked about on last week's show, when kind of the rumor and the press conference was initially announced about the Vancouver side of things, it's exactly as we expected as far as the existence of PWHL Vancouver, and that they will play at the Pacific Coliseum, which for hockey has a capacity of 16,281, which is very solid. And the biggest part of all of that, and something they reiterated, is that the PWHL team that plays there is going to be the primary tenant of the venue. And that is the first time this has happened for the PWHL and for women's pro hockey here. So I think that is the biggest impact of this announcement for sure.
Welcome to Vancouver, BC. What a crowd. More than 19,000 hockey fans coming out to see the Takeover Tour on the West Coast. Right in front of rebound, they score! Marie-Philippe Poulin, Captain Clutch, has done it again in Vancouver. The official attendance here in Vancouver, 19,038 hockey fans.
Yeah, honestly, when I jumped on that ice for warm-up, it was quite special. Honestly, to see these fans coming out and supporting us, it's been unbelievable, and really happy to be back in Vancouver.
There she is. There she is once again. I mean, I love it. Just give me a little emerald green and I'm in, baby.
Yeah. Vancouver did have, as they mentioned, the highest attendance of the Takeover Tour. So if that was the only indicator of who would get an expansion team, I think, of course, it makes sense that Vancouver would get it. And they are the third biggest market in Canada. For them to not have a team yet, like if you're going to pick any Canadian city, like of course it was going to be Vancouver, right?
The fans have spoken, right? The fans have told us from Vancouver, from the Takeover Tour, to their engagement around social media with us, that this is a market for us. And I'm proud to say, you know, a few hours after making the announcement official, we are actually sold out of premium season ticket deposits.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were talking offline. I will say there are some very passionate reporters in Quebec City as well as Detroit that were really grilling Amy Shearer as well as Jana Hefford on the media call. But what we also found out on that media call, and we've already alluded to it, but the official word regarding any expansion, not specific to Seattle. The PWHL via Jana and Amy kept the cards close as they have this whole time, at least officially. The word is that they are hopeful. We heard hopeful, Rachel, multiple times that there will be another expansion city named.
Yes, we are hopeful that we will announce a second team that will play next season.
However, they are not prepared to make that announcement at this time. That was the other day, and I'm assuming that will be the statements that we will hear until we hear that there's an announcement that is taking place in Seattle.
Right. And I think, you know, honestly, with that, I think that's part of the reason why they said details will be forthcoming on how the expansion draft is going to work and how a new team or teams will fold into the regular draft that they are holding, because if there's going to be a second expansion team announcement, that will affect all of that. But you know, it also may make sense to announce a second expansion team, but also to announce that they're going to roll in these teams one at a time in consecutive years. So without knowing any of that, of course, they can't announce any details about how an expansion draft would function. But I think that, you know, decisions have to be made sooner rather than later in order to figure all that out, because as we talked about last week, the draft is already scheduled for the tail end of June. Correct. And that's the deadline we're working with here.
And May is literally next week. So, you know, like by the time we record next, we will be a few days into May.
Okay, so that was Rachel Donner and I for the Women's Hockey Report, which lives on the Locked On NHL channel, talking about what we know about Vancouver expansion at the time, what we still needed to figure out. There will be an expansion draft that will happen before the entry draft, which is in late June. But again, as Rachel alluded to, with at the time the PWHL being hopeful, air quotes for my audio listeners, that they would announce a second expansion team. We were still waiting for those details, but those details seem to be coming this week on Wednesday at Climate Pledge Arena. That's what we're thinking. The CPA announcement, of course, did not mention ice hockey. And for what it's worth, the Seattle Storm do also play at Climate Pledge Arena. I would be shocked if this is a WNBA announcement. I don't think it's an NWSL announcement. I think we're talking, or we're doing the hockey. That's what I think. Coming up on Locked On Kraken, though, let's go back to our exit interviews. I got so turned around when the Kraken once again fired a head coach, but I do want to reflect on the captain, Jordan Eberle, and we will close out the show talking about the Firebirds and the Mavericks, two teams that are in the playoffs and both advanced to the second round. We'll get into it on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Yeah, that used to be me before I switched to Monarch Money, specifically to handle my business finances. I've streamlined all of the accounts where I primarily do any banking, any buying for my business, Black Rosie Media, to Monarch Money. And Monarch Money comes in as my personal CFO because I'm still very lean and don't have one officially. It gives me full visibility and control over my finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. I personally love looking at the dashboards, the cash flow dashboard. Most of the time, I definitely like when the cash is flowing up and not when I'm seeing all the money go out. But either way, it's really important to know. Sorry, Biscuit. It's important to know where your money is going, especially as a business owner, a small business owner, and a solopreneur. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch, check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals, like saving for tickets for the next Heim tour for several years. And now, just today, on the same day that we get an announcement of the likely announcement of the PWHL coming to Seattle, Heim tour announced also. And thanks to Monarch Money, I have a spending bucket specifically for that. Also, just to note, that's not a business expense. That's a separate aside. But I also use Monarch Money for my savings account. Just want to do that in case anyone from the IRS is listening. Take control over your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey, thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, talked about expansion, PWHL expansion. We should get an official announcement on Wednesday. Unfortunately, Biscuit took a little spill, but I do hope to have some people once again from Women's Pro Hockey to Seattle on Locked On Kraken to talk about women's pro hockey in Seattle. And if you're an everydayer or an OGer, then you know I spoke to Zoe as one of my first, actually might have been my first ever interview for Locked On Kraken. We talked about the history of women's hockey. I cannot wait to dive into that history again. And of course, what the future holds. Speaking though about the future and the past, aka history, let's hear what the captain, Jordan Eberle, made of this season. Now, this is the recording on the day that the Kraken fired Dan Bylsma. This is what I was going to talk about before the news came in literally as I was recording. You've seen some of those reactions if you've been keeping up with Locked On Kraken. Hopefully you're already subscribed on YouTube or your favorite audio platform. You can listen on Sirius SXM. You can listen on Amazon. We're on like fast TV channels, so you can watch on YouTube, but also on like your Amazon Fire TV, Roku, things like that. So definitely make sure you're keeping up with the show, because we do a lot of cool stuff here, and some of it are callbacks, like Women's Pro Hockey Seattle. But I'm going to call back to just last week, even though it seems so much longer than that, where I was breaking down Jordan Eberle's exit interview, as well as his performance for the Seattle Kraken this season. What's cracking, Seattle hockey fans? Eberle, our captain. And I probably will have some time to get to some of the YouTube comments over the weekend. Some people think he's on the wrong side of 30. Think that he should be a part of the moves and the changes. I think if you listen to the show, I'm probably not pro that position. I understand that position, and I think that what Eberle offers, it's what we need. If you look at just his Eberle by the numbers, he played the least amount of games this season than he has in his entire career. And we know that was because of injury. So I'll pull this up for those watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, I will walk you through. I'm on Jordan Eberle, his NHL.com page. You can see his career stats. He started in the league in 2010-11 with the Edmonton Oilers. He spent some time with the Islanders, and of course, the last 4 seasons now with the Seattle Kraken. So if we look at his numbers for 2024-25, 42 games. That is the fewest number of games that he has played in his career. Prior to this season, he played 48 games in 2012-13. This is the only season where he had single-digit goals. He had 9 goals this season in 42 games. He's averaging about 30 or so. We can see some of his numbers, about 20 or so goals, is about his average. He's tipped that average a few times. So anywhere from 20 to 30 goals is what we're expecting from Ebs. He hit 17 for the Kraken last year, 9 this year. So, same with assists, everything down, his points down. That's because he was away from the game. And, I said this early on, Jordan Eberle, announcing him as captain, I think he came out flying. He came out absolutely flying early on this year. It's just that he didn't stay healthy. He had a very serious injury that took a lot of time to heal, but he was getting it done for us. He had an assist in that first game. He had 2 goals in the Minnesota game. He's up to already 6 goals within the first 6 games of this season. Before we lost him after that November 14th game, where he only played 6 minutes. That was against Chicago. So I think for Eberle, this was a season like no other. I think that, and I've talked a lot about, especially on the other side of the trade deadline, Eberle and his leadership got things on track for this Seattle Kraken team. And again, I know there are some people, I've got to do some more recon. Thankfully, I have all of the videos ever for the Seattle Kraken. But, there might have been more of a culture issue than I was picking up on in the regular season. And Eberle came in and seemed to right the ship, not just when he entered the lineup, but again, especially when he was signaling to media what he expected from this team with 20 games left, knowing they wouldn't be headed to the playoffs. So I'm super big on Jordan Eberle. I think that he gives us what we still need. That being said, I get the argument. He's on the wrong side, right? He's on the wrong side of 30. But this is a Kraken team that does need some bridge guys. I think his number, as far as his price, we're getting a good price. I do think it signals that the Seattle Kraken are open to moving him. But if it were me, I say Eb stays. But let's hear what Eberle had to make of this NHL season.
Yeah, from a personal standpoint, obviously a whirlwind of a year. Obviously felt like I got off to a pretty good start and felt confident in the way that I was playing. And, you get hurt with an injury and you have to miss half the year and not be around. It's always hard. So, I was proud of the way that I battled back and got back into the lineup. And, but ultimately, you're not playing hockey at this time of the year, regardless of, it comes down to just, you're pissed off. You play this game to play in the playoffs and you're not there. That's frustrating.
I feel like you ever got close to 100% coming back, or would you think of how you were able to handle it?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I thought I, found my game quicker than I thought I was going to. Missing that much time probably took me a few games, but I really felt like I, got back in and was playing back to the speed I wanted to a lot quicker than I thought I was going to. So, that was a positive. I think the medical staff team here and the trainers, they did a heck of a job to, prepare me and get me going. So, I still feel like I have, a lot of gas and I want to play for a few more years and more importantly, I want to, have a chance to win.
Like riding a bicycle, basically.
Yeah, not quite, but yeah.
How's the body feeling now?
Throughout a 82-game skis, I only played half, but it's no one's healthy in this league. You're always playing with something. So, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I feel good enough that, like I said, I still want to play. There's a lot of aspects. The detailed part of our game and, the special teams. There's many aspects that we need to be better. There's many aspects that we got better in. But at the end of the day, we're not where we want to be. And, I don't know if you can put your finger on one instance. I just think at the end of the day, we all need to be better.
And so we heard Eberle talk about his leadership, and his leadership trajectory changed when he wasn't in the locker room in the same space as his teammates. But, he still found ways to communicate, still found ways to get the message across. And he was bullish once the team got to the other side of the trade deadline, that this was a team that was going to focus on everyday battling. You heard him talk about that a little bit. He also talked about how, this was a tough go for him personally because he had to deal with an injury, and that's never easy. But Eberle did so, I think, with the utmost level of professionalism, of respect for his team and what they were going through, and also trying to be a leader when he was absent from the team. So I think we get a lot of good from Eberle. But as I mentioned, we have some comments that I wanted to refer to. I always appreciate y'all posting comments. It definitely gives an added layer to the conversation. So always appreciate when you can chime in. First, from an everydayer for sure, we heard from Striatic. I'm nervous about this next season. Bjorky needs to not only be replaced, but improved on, and that won't be easy. And Shane needs a more featured role. Ebsen, Schwartz, and Lars continue to be on the wrong side of an aging curve. There are young talents coming up, but there are more vets that are aging out. Indications are that the team will miss the playoffs again, and a multi-year rebuild is in process. Yeah, I don't really agree when we hear from, and again, we'll hear from Ron Francis, Striatic, and everyone else tomorrow, but I don't agree when this team says that they're one metric here away from the playoffs, one metric there away from the playoffs. I didn't believe that going into this season. I thought that we could be in playoff contention, but not securely. And I don't know. We have to, of course, see what free agency is going to bring, what the draft is going to bring. I was chuckling reading some of the comments saying, please, let's not go with another forward, another centerman. People want to see us build through the draft and get defensemen. I am all about that. I really thought William was a good pick for us last year. That didn't come to pass. So it's going to be curious. We still have, it's going to be curious to see what the organization does. We still have a ways, over a month
closer, to a month and a half, I suppose, 2 months really, before we know what that's going to look like. So, we have people in the comments saying that they want Eddie Olczyk to go. I think Eddie serves a very particular purpose. I think he has things that he's been able to bring to the broadcast. Him and John and some of their playful banter, I think I can excuse it to a degree. They're good friends, and sometimes that makes for really funny moments. It's not always my favorite. I like to hear a little bit more from some of the other people on the broadcast. But I don't know. I don't know if Enzo's on his way out. We do have some people, though, that want to see Dan Bylsma on the way out. We're starting to see head coaches get let go this NHL season. I don't think that Bylsma and his coaching staff, I don't think that it's time to let them go. I think the leash is super short. I think the promise of what this team could be, and it goes back to talking about Eberle, and I've spoken about this a lot. I do think that his drive and his call for this team to be competitive led to, that short little win streak that we had in the last 7 to 10 games, right? So I don't want to see Bylsma go. He does have to improve. And if you listen to our last episode, then we played that part of his exit interview. He knows. And I've talked about it, right? That some of what happened, you have to put on the coaching staff. Is it a fireable offense? For me, no. When I told you, when they fired Haxtell, we got Bylsma, that the questions that needed to be answered for this organization were front office decision-making questions and not solely coaches' decision-making questions. And I think that still played out. The Grubauer situation, the Daniel Sprong situation, and maybe you wanted to get Sprong back a second time this season alone, I guess, for quote unquote parts. I don't understand. Didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I think there's some things that there are limitations. And Zame and I talked about this once. I think that Ronnie Francis, and his reputation is he's great at building the pipeline, but we saw the same thing in Carolina. He wasn't the right guy to get Carolina into the playoffs, which then they're still bearing fruit, right? From getting that first playoff run post Ron Francis with the pieces that he brought to the team, they're still a playoff contender, a perennial playoff contender, to the point where Dan Bylsma, when he was asked about one of his highlights, is playing a Carolina team, playing a great brand of Kraken hockey, baby, against Carolina and getting that win. That was a highlight in a season that had a lot of inconsistency. And the reason that you use Carolina as a barometer is because what they were able to do on the ice, not just in the pipeline. And so whether it's a general manager, and I think maybe possibly a coach, is Dan Bylsma in for the long haul? I don't know. I think that I want to see a little bit more from him, though. I think that for me, if there's going to be a move, if someone's going to get fired, I think that move would come from the front office. It should come from the front office before it comes to the coaching staff. But I suppose we'll have to see how we feel tomorrow after we hear Ronnie Francis talk. And today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by Wonderful Pistachio. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, Seattle hockey fans, we talked about PWHL expansion. We're expecting that news on Wednesday. We've also heard from Eberle in his exit interviews. I broke down why I think Eberle is one of the guys that we keep
I hear what people are saying about our contracts and some of our guys being a little old and, not playing certain younger players enough. I know Striatic has commented both through subtext, our Locked On Kraken Insiders program. We're going to revamp that, but I'm waiting on a few things, more details. But, through the insiders and also on YouTube saying, because I've been saying, I think between Sam and Todd and Ron and Jason, I'm not sure that everyone's on the same page as far as what the timeline is. And if you want to get rid of folks like Schwartz, Eberle, even Burakovsky, I read that comment from Striatic from the other day, then you're giving a lot of responsibility to people who are brand new to the NHL. That to me doesn't sound like a win right now, as soon as possible team. Striatic had a different approach that as soon as possible doesn't mean immediately, and literally it doesn't. It means as soon as possible. That being said, why was it that we were able to win and get to a championship in season 2 and we haven't been able to replicate that? But I told you that. Gosh, I sometimes hate being like, the person who God, my allergies are really bad today. Excuse me. I hate being sometimes that person who's like, remember what I said? But I told you, the Kraken arrived too early to the party in season 2. And my biggest fear after season 2 is that we weren't going to maneuver in the right ways to be able to sustain that. And that's exactly what's happened. I don't know if we're overcorrecting. Have we course corrected? Where do we stand? What's realistic? Are we just washing that like it never happened and rebuilding, retooling? There's so many different ways. There's so many different, phrases that we could use to encompass what is happening with the Seattle Kraken team. I just don't know. But what I do know, fans, is that your Firebirds and your Kansas City Mavericks are advancing in the playoffs. That's right. Coachella Valley, after that wild overtime game, gets another win against the Wranglers, Calgary, and they have advanced to the second round of the Calder Cup playoffs. What that looks like for your Coachella Valley Firebirds is that we are taking on the Abbotsford Canucks. Everything gets started this Thursday, May the 1st. Ooh, May is coming up. It's gonna be May. I was a Backstreet Boys fan personally, but I'm a May baby, so, Thursday, May 1st, Coachella Valley is going to host the first 2 games, May 1st and May 3rd, and then Abbotsford the rest of the way. So, can your Coachella Valley Firebirds, in a little bit of a different situation coming into these playoffs than the last 2 seasons under Dan Bylsma, can they advance and take the Pacific Division semifinals and advance to the Pacific Division finals? Of course they can. Of course they can. We've been getting great goaltending from Coco. Mitchell Stevens once again came up huge for the Coachella Valley Firebirds in game number 2. He got the first goal. First goal came in the second period. And John Hayden got the second goal. That was an empty net goal. So this was a tight game, but in favor of your Coachella Valley Firebirds. Nikola Coco, 23 shots faced, 23 saved for a shutout. He was your first star of the game. Stevens, your second star, and John Hayden, your third star. Things are clicking on all cylinders for your Coachella Valley Firebirds. They advance, but they're not the only ones. Now, I was at the ECHL game Friday night. Yes. That was a back-to-back game. We once again saw Jack LaFontaine in net. I'm not sure. I didn't get to speak to Jack, but I think maybe he had family or someone close to him that was able to come to these games in Tulsa. Both nights, well, I guess I was there 3 nights, but 2 of the nights for sure. I'm not sure about the first night. 2 nights for sure. It looked like he was just speaking to someone after the game. He's the only player that came out to speak to someone. And of course, I spoke to Tad O'Had after the game on Friday, where the Kansas City Mavericks lose to Tulsa. What we heard from Tad is that the team just, they didn't have the giddy up. This has been a very physical series. Tulsa really bringing the body, heavy hits into the boards against Kansas City. And although they had great poise when it came to Thursday's game, a little bit different on Friday, but that's all right. That's okay. Because Kansas City got it done at home. They were able to get the win 4-0, 2 goals in the first frame, and then 1 in each following period. Cade Brochard once again scores. You got Nolan Sullivan, Damian Giroux, as well as Jackson Berezowski. Jackson Berezowski scored as well. So, this is a Kansas City team that in the Tulsa series had to really learn how to play with poise while also not kind of playing like punks. Tad was very bullish about that. He wanted his team to stick up for each other. He wanted them to stay disciplined, though, while not getting punked. And they get the win, so they will advance in the Kelly Cup playoffs. And so when we look at the bracket for the ECHL playoffs, with the win, Kansas City, the Mavericks, take the series 4-2, and they are going to take on the Tahoe Night Monsters, and that will be the next series for your Kansas City Mavericks. Of course, we will keep you updated as as things come to play. We know that Thursday starts things for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. When it comes to your Kansas City Mavericks, Mountain Division finals will start on Sunday. May the 4th be with you. Yes, I'm getting all of the May jokes. You just deal with it. Sunday, May 4th at home. So in Independence, Missouri. And then again on Monday, May 5th. So ticket information coming soon. And of course, I will have you updated here. I have a good friend from an organization that I used to work with way back in the day. Oh my gosh, we were so young. I feel like I'm like old enough to say, oh my gosh, we were so young when we were doing all the crazy things that we were doing. Anyway, a good friend of mine and her family live about 15 minutes from Independence. So I don't know if I'm going to make it out to see the Mavericks this season, but I'm definitely going to go next season. Catch up with my friend and her family, her beautiful family who I haven't seen in ages. Have a good time, take in some hockey. Let's see how they do in these Kelly Cup playoffs. I mean, a nice little day trip up to Kansas City area. Who says no? Well, that's all for our show. This was a jam-packed show. I didn't even get to talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs, but let's talk about that a little bit. Tomorrow, I'll dive into these series for Kansas City, for Coachella Valley a little bit more. And we'll continue on with our exit interviews. And of course, you can expect that Wednesday, but honestly, probably Thursday, because I'll be traveling Wednesday. But for Thursday's episode, I will talk about the announcement that is happening at Climate Pledge Arena. And fingers crossed, everything goes as scheduled. And we get to talk to Jessica Campbell at the ESPNW Summit in my home state, my city of New York. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, and let's hold fast Let's stay true and loud and proud we say, let's go Kraken, let's go Firebirds, and let's go Mavericks. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.